Hello again everyone, Mary Rose here at Stitch Bliss Corner on Wednesday, March the 18th, 2020. And I thought today that I would just put a video together that wasn't really organised. I went to the box of pieces that I've finished and just got some of those out to share with you, because people who've seen me before, that watched my videos before, they will have seen these. But I thought, well, why don't I just do that? Because it's just nice to have another look at them and talk about them. And also, I've got a few other things to say, not surprisingly. And I think in these uncertain times, I was going to the supermarket. Well, we went to the supermarket about 4 days ago, just to get a few provisions together, because, well, you don't really know what's going to be happening. We can isolate ourselves away from things, but I don't know how long that's viable for, really. We'll just have to see. I think it is important to protect vulnerable members of the community, that's for sure. Harlequin and I are on the borderline. We're heading towards 70, but we haven't got there yet. But still and all, it's the civic duty of everybody to try to do the right thing and to reduce as much as they can their chances of passing on anything they may have or actually contracting this virus. And I was thinking, when I was in the supermarket, as I said, we were just walking round, and I was just looking at all the people that were there shopping, and the workers, the office workers, men in the high-vis trades clothes, plumbers, electricians, the people on the checkouts. You can't help but be full of, it's not exactly compassion, it's more just an awareness of your fellow man, the people around you, and they have families and everything. And you're thinking, it's just a bit upsetting. But at the same time, we're living in modern times where we are being given the opportunity to do them as much as we can to lessen the impact of this virus. Tom Hanks, for anyone in America who's wondering, Tom Hanks has now been released from hospital, and he's gone to finish his isolation in a domestic setting, and then he's just been released back into his home as well to finish his isolation. So it looks as though this particular virus, it can manifest itself in quite a virulent way, but it can also be relatively mild, shall we say. And if the people who catch it develop an immunity to it, which is usually what happens with a virus, because you get a virus and your body makes antigens or antibodies towards that virus. A bit like when you get an inoculation for something like smallpox. In my day anyway, you had to go and get your smallpox vaccination, they called it. And it was a very weakened form of the virus, so that when you got that inoculation, when the real thing came along, your body was already prepared to fight it. So the more people who have had the virus and develop an immunity to it, then the less the virus is around to be passed on, because if 20 people have had it, then those 20 people go out into the community but they're not going to be infecting anyone because they've already had it. And they're not going to get it because they've already had it as well. So there are less, it's called herd immunity, where the herd slowly gets that immunity. And then the more vulnerable people, whereas some might still get it, there's less chance of them getting it because there is less of the virus to be passed on to people because less, people are more immune. So I think that's another way of looking at it, that I think that's why some of these viruses, you feel like they're, like SARS, for example. People say, well, where did that go? It was here and people were really concerned about it and it wreaked havoc for, so many months. And then suddenly it disappeared. Well, it's still in the community, SARS, but there's just less people vulnerable to it, I think. And this is hopefully what will happen with this particular one, that it will eventually fizzle out because either people are immune to it or it's got nowhere to go because people aren't passing it on to each other. But anyway, to get back to what I was thinking, I got back and I was thinking of a documentary I saw once about the Second World War, and it was a man who lived through the Blitz, which was the bombing of London. And he said that he'd be sitting in his house because, those houses are all joined together. And I don't know, some of the younger people who might be watching, they don't know what a doodlebug is, but a doodlebug was a precursor to the guided missiles that are around today. It was a flying bomb. It had wings on it and a little motor on it. And then it would go along for so long, and you never knew when that motor was going to stop. And when it stopped, the bomb would just drop. And he said that you could hear them going over, these doodlebugs. And he said, because they lived in terrace houses all joined together, he said you'd hear the motor stop. And he said, you'd think, is that number 22, 24, 26? He might be in house number 26, house number 28, 30, bang. And he said, this is what it was like. And it's a bit like this virus. That's what I was thinking about. That in the war years, nobody knew what was going to happen. It was a great uncertainty. And people just rallied around each other. They did what they could for each other. I mean, this is more difficult because you're supposed to keep, away from each other and all that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean that you can't have a sense of community and a sense of compassion for people. And I was looking at this book here when I got home, The Royal Family in Wartime, because that's when the royal family, in times of crisis, they've always been the ones that people have turned to because they have a great sense of duty. That's what they're about as a family. George VI, for example, the Queen's father, he was never meant to be king. He had a severe speech impediment, not when he spoke. He had problems pronouncing his words, and he also had a really bad stammer. And his older brother, that was Edward VIII, he was king. As far as George was concerned, that was fine by him. He had a lovely wife, that was the Queen Mother, and the girls, his treasures. And anyway, his brother decided that he didn't want the throne. Well, it wasn't the case if he didn't want the throne. He was required to abdicate because in those days, he'd chosen someone who had been twice divorced. And as someone said in one of the documentaries that I watched once, that if you'd been divorced, you weren't allowed in the enclosure at Ascot. And she'd been divorced twice. So, and also Edward did not have that sense of duty in the same way. He tended to be a bit of a playboy before he met Wallis. And I think that he really wasn't interested in the dispatches that came. You know, I mean, the Queen gets dispatches every day, cases with all these documents in that have to be signed and all this kind of thing. And, you know, he was expected to do that. And I mean, he just wasn't keen. He was a party man, you know, most of the time. So to cut a long story short, anyway, when Edward VIII abdicated, it was put to George, his younger brother, the responsibility, immense responsibility, of taking that role on. And I've seen a picture of him in the car when he was on his way, when he realised what was going on. And he did look like a man going to war. That's what this person said. He looked his face was nearly ashen as he realised the responsibility that was on his shoulders, especially as he had that speech problem. And he worked with someone to help to fix that. I mean, his first public speaking role, it was in this great big, I think it was a football stadium or something. And, you know, when you speak on a loudspeaker, there's echo in your ear. It's really hard to do anyway. But he also had, you know, he must have been just mortified. But eventually they worked out a way that he could serve that role. And he was a lot better in his speeches later. But what I'm saying is that things are put upon you in your life. And it's really important to make the best of it as you can. I think that, and this is what they've always done, the royal family. And here's a picture of George here with General Eisenhower, and he's got his uniform on there as king. And then I'll just show you. It's in the wartime. I'll just show you these pictures. Now, Buckingham Palace was bombed, I think up to 8 or 9 times Buckingham Palace was bombed, and they never left Buckingham Palace right the way through the war, the King and Queen, because, well, she was the Queen. She was the Queen until Elizabeth became Queen, and then she became the Queen Mother. But here they are, going round amongst the people during that time. And the great saying came to be, keep calm and carry on. And that's just what they did do. And of course, Elizabeth, she wanted to be involved. And she ended in the war effort, and she was working on army vehicles and everything. I've got a picture of her here somewhere, but because I haven't prepared adequately, I'll just see if I can find her. But the point of the matter is, oh yes, well, here she is anyway in her uniform, behind her parents. Because when she really just wanted to be of use. And Elizabeth has always been someone who has been a very dutiful person. There she is in her uniform there. And she worked on the military vehicles. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to reflect on, that, you know, with the shortage of supplies and all this sort of thing, because I can remember bread and dripping was something, you know, after the war, because I mean, I was born in 1953, but there were still shortages because the war, ended in 45. So, things hadn't gone completely back to normal. And you used to have sandwiches with sauce on, just put a sauce on there. Or the bread and dripping was the dripping, if you were lucky enough to get meat, the scraping from under the meat, you put that on your toast or whatever, that you toasted on a fork in front of the fire. So all of what I'm saying is people have a way of managing through trying times, and they do end. And that's the thing, to keep focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel rather than the tunnel itself. Right, so that's all I'm saying about that, unless something else pops into my head. So we'll go on now to something else. Now, Lisa Bergen, if you're watching, I just wanted to let you know about this DVD, The Shadow and the Tower. Shadow of the Tower, I do beg your pardon. If you can get your hands on this, Lisa, it's an excellent series about Henry VII, because I know that you're interested in Tudor history, and it's really well done. And it's done before all this politically correct nonsense, when you've got all these things going on that are just so ridiculously off the wall for historical things that you think, why do, I suppose it's entertainment, but I certainly hope school students aren't using modern historical films for their examinations, because they'll fall flat on their face if they decide to do that. So now then, I think I might do the stitching, the Lost No More, just to show you that I've finished the outlining. I don't call it back stitching because I don't do much back stitch. I mean, obviously there's a few in there, but I mostly do couching. So I have done a video on couching, yeah, it might give you a few pointers. Anyway, so here is Lost No More by Dimensions. Now I will now go to the video where I've done my before the outlining and after the outlining, so you can compare the two. That'll probably have varying degrees of success. So just see what you think anyway. And then we'll get back to me. Right, so here is, I'll just show you the actual stitching here now. So he's complete. Now for the face, until I just get my iPad here, because I thought this might be easier. For the face, I used cotton. First of all, I used this cotton here, very thin cotton. But I found that it didn't quite make the features stand out enough. So then I just went to this black cotton. It's just it's finer than the DMC threads or, embroidery threads. And I think it's just about right for me. So for advice, I would say to anyone who's doing a face, to make sure that you get your crosses in the right spot, because when you're actually doing your outlining of the nose and the mouth and everything, you have to go, it has to be exact if you want the exact same face. In my case, the end of the nose, I've made it a bit rounder because on the actual picture, it's a bit, the angle was a bit too, oh, it's gonna, if you can see it, a bit too, you know, angular for me. I just wanted a little bit of roundness there. So that I did change, but I think fudging is fine for most things, but on the face, it's very important to get those stitches in exactly the right place, because that's what you're using as your landmarks for your actual face features. And excuse me, things can go awry very quickly if you haven't got that accurate. So that's one of my pieces of advice for that. Now, was there any other advice I've got here? Oh, I just let you know. Now, there might be some noise outside, and that is because the house opposite, they're doing some renovations to it. So there are trucks coming and going and all sorts going on over there. Now, I began the piece December 1st, 2019, and I finished it on March the 16th, 2020. Now, when I did my outlining, I didn't use the threads that were provided by Dimensions because I just used the conversion chart. Harlequin printed this out for me, and it's got, you know, the dimension number and the so-called equivalent of the DMC. Now, quite a few of them that you have a look and you think, well, that's really not that close to it. But for outlining anyway, I think they were all pretty close to what I wanted. And I like to have a lot of thread when I'm doing my outlining. I don't like to be stressing over whether I've got enough. So that's what I did. I just used the DMC conversion. So I just thought I'd let you know about that. Now, what else have I got here? Well, I suppose I could show you what I'm up to at the moment. And that is, I mean, I'm sensing a theme here. It just seems to be happening. It isn't by design. Sorry, I'm just looking for the actual title. Right, found it. It's this one here. I'm doing it on 18 count Ada that I dyed myself. I dyed blue. Now, you can do half stitches with Ada. You just need a sharp needle and a bit of determination. And this IHS here, that's a monogram symbolizing Jesus Christ. So I am stitching this for someone. So it just spoke to me that person would like this particular one rather than my own taste. Although I do like it, you know, as it's being stitched, it's coming up really nicely. I'm just put it up on here. Now, there is the crown of thorns there, and that's going to take a lot of outlining, as you can see, and you just couldn't, I don't think you can fudge this. I think you have to do it absolutely exactly correct, or else it just won't work out. And then I've rolled this side up just to protect it, because normally I wash everything that I stitch and to set the stitches, but in this case, because I've dyed this with food colouring, it's not, if I wash it, it's going to all wash out. So I've just rolled that up and I hold it with these little clips here. There. And because there needs to be a dove over here, and it says on there, it did not end here, it began. And there's the beautiful dove. So I'm enjoying this very much. So I just thought I would show you that. Here is the palette. I'll show you properly. So it's nice, rich colours in there. But at the same time they're, what's the word? They're rich, but they're understated, I suppose you'd say. I'm just looking, let's give you some more details. Stony Creek collection. Right, so that's what I've been doing. And I think, you know, it's very timely anyway, because it is, you know, getting close to Easter. Now, what I've done, this is the palette of colours, and there are a lot of blended threads there, where you have to blend it with white. So, for example, where are we? On this side here, all I've done is I've made 2 holes, and what I haven't used of the colour I've popped back in there, so I can use it when I need to, because it works for me. I mean, it looks a bit messy, but it does work for me, because, you know, I can't be asked with, you know, too much preparation with things. I like to, well, I do the preparation that is required in my gridding and everything. I'm quite, well, I'm very particular about that. But other things I'm not so particular about, as long as I can get those stitches in and achieve what I want to achieve. So now then, what are we going to do now? I think I'll show you some of my older pieces now, just to have a bit of fun. Now this one's in no particular order. And I suppose this is just to prove to people that I have actually done beading. I just don't like beading. I mean, it doesn't do anything for me, absolutely nothing. I can see why people, you know, with the mirabilias and everything, I can certainly see they have a place there, because they do enhance the work. But the actual doing it is just not for me. So I just went to town with this, because this is, of course, a Tudor piece, and I don't know even if you can see them, but here that's all beading there, and on his sleeves that's all beading. Her sleeves, what's with this dress here? Yeah, that's all beading down there, and I literally didn't know where to stop. I just kept on and on and on with it, and that's been rolled up in my box for I don't know how long. And see, that was before I started. See how I've got this, I've backstitched all around there. That's before I started couching. If I did that today, that would be all rounded off, so it'd look round. Because I don't like that angular look. But anyway, I mean, this had just about everything in it. It was all, you know, there's a lot of black work in there and everything. And I did enjoy it. So that's that. I'll roll that one up. Probably go back in the box till who knows when. And then an old favourite here that I really will have to, I'm going to try and finish him this year, and that's the Skating Minister. And I did decide with him, under normal circumstances, I had every intention of finishing the whole scene, the big lock and the hills behind and everything else. But then it did occur to me that there is only a finite amount of time I've got left for stitching. And so I probably will not, if I was in my 20s, that's what I'd be doing. But since I'm not, I'm thinking that I'm just going to stitch around him as much as I need to, and then I'm going to put him in an oval frame. And then here's father of 5, a minister going out skating on a loch in Scotland, and having this little bit of relaxation, although his wife is probably the one that needed the relaxation with all those children in those trying times as well, because it was pretty harsh living in those days. So that's the Skating Minister, for anyone who's wondering what's happening with him. That is what will be happening, that's for sure. I've just got to get myself organised. Now that one was that was something that didn't get anywhere, so I won't worry about that one. So we've done that. What else have we got here? Oh, this beautiful poem. And I just liked that poem so much that I stitched it. And it says, it's called Love After Love by Derek Walcott. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. So I just wanted to put that. I just wanted to stitch the words. I mean, I don't even feel that I would have to frame that and put it up. It was just the stitching of the words. It just meant a lot to me. Now, what else have we got here? Oh, these beautiful poppies. Love those. This was an anchor kit. And someone expressed an interest in I don't know if it was this one, it might have been this one, and I sent it off to them, and I never heard anything about it, so I hope it did get there. You know, if it didn't get there, I did send it, so just in case they were wondering. else have we got? Oh, my tiger. This one, I did, what are they called? I forget the name of the stitch now. Begins with A. Anyway, I just took one verse. The tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? William Blake. Now, I wanted this, for once, I want this to not have any glass in the frame, because those letters sit up very nicely, because I did this particular stitch. I just did from top to bottom, side to side, cross and cross. So it's one of those. No, it's not A, it's S, Smyrna stitches, that's it. So I used those. So that was that piece. And let's see now. Can you hear that noise? I wonder if you can hear it. It's a truck or something. That reminds me of when I was young. Remember I said about toasting the bread in front of the fire? That's what it was like. This was a Teddy Tum Tum series, and I particularly like that. I've always liked bears. So that's that one. Now this is called Soul's Flight. It's a male designer. Just got a little bit of a loose thread there. Right. And you can see the butterflies are flying off there. My husband spent some time in Africa when he was a young man, and he really liked it there, and so I stitched that for him, but I just haven't really got round to framing, because you know how it is. You enjoy the stitching. I mean, maybe I'm a bit of a process stitcher. I just like stitching pieces. And as if that wasn't enough, I did a second one, and that was for someone, but that person, I didn't see the person again, so I don't know what she's doing now. So if she does turn up again, she can have it. That's what it boils down to. So I've kept that for her, because you just don't know. I mean, you might see someone, and 10 years later you just pick up in this where you left off. I mean, life happens. People move off and do other things, and then come back into your realm. You just don't know, do you? So anyway, I think that's enough of my pieces, because I'm getting exhausted with it. So, well, here was one. Now this is an interesting one, insofar as it's a lesson learned for if you leave something too long without getting back to it. Because this now, if I tried to finish it, I wouldn't be able to get the same dye lot. So I think that even though there's not that much more to go with it, I mean, I could try, but I just don't think that I'll be able to. If I get round to it, I'll give it a go. So that's an example of, if you're that close to finishing something, just finish it. Don't faff around for 20 years and leave it. Now, I'm going to put, because we all need a little bit of escapism, I suppose, I'm going to put a little link to a video. Now, most people may have heard of Torvill and Dean. They were an ice skating pair that came to fame in the 80s, mostly anyway. Christopher Dean and Jane Torvill and Christopher Dean. Get it right. They were sensational. I mean, they were a level above everybody else. He choreographed all their dances and everything. And they won the gold medal. Well, one of the gold medals they won was for ice dancing. This was, I think, in 1984. Now, it says it's 7 minutes, but it isn't. It's just over 3 minutes. And it's called Paso Doble. And if you've got time, have a look at it, because there was all the pressure of the gold medal, because in those days anyway, if you fell or anything, that was it. It wasn't like, oh, it's a gold medal round, so we'll just deduct a slight point or something. Falling was pretty much put you out of the medals. But today I think they have a different system where you can fall over and you still get a gold, which to me is ridiculous. I mean, gold is supposed to be for a perfect performance, not for a performance when someone's fallen over. I know it's easy for me to say sitting here, but I'm just saying, as a gold, well, it's a gold standard, isn't it? That you do something to perfection and you risk everything to get that perfection. And every Olympics, somebody does get that perfection. But I think the problem was that a lot of people were shying away from doing the more difficult moves because they didn't want to fall. So they decided to make a compromise. Whatever. To get back to what I was talking about, in this particular piece, the Paso Doble, Jane is the cape and Christopher is the bullfighter. Now, in most ice skating, just like in ballet, the main focus is usually on the female, because I think the only ballet dancer, male, that ever, apart from Nijinsky, that ever got everybody watching him was Rudolf Nureyev. Who was a magnificent dancer, and you just couldn't take your eyes off him, even if he was dancing with a female. And I think Christopher, in this particular case, this was his moment. And if you do watch it, just watch out for the strutting and the final move that they do. It's unbelievable. Was there anything else about that? Yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoy it, because I enjoy it. I've watched it about 5 times the last couple of days, because it is nice to have a bit of escapism. I mean, they were gentler times, that's for sure. Now, what else have I got here? Now, just in case people were wondering too, I was doing this mystic stitch, Heaven on Earth it's called. It's not a heaven and earth design, it's heaven on earth, this one. And I'm just letting you know, I've still got it there, it's still rolled up, but I just haven't got that spark in me at the moment to be stitching that one. I would like to be doing it, but for some reason I think it's just not doing it for me at the moment. And also this winter morning one, I'm sort of halfway through that, so I'm not sure whether I'm going to get back to that. I do have this kind of inkling in me that I would like to start a new piece for this particular time in history for me. And that's this one here, of all things. Because I want to be thinking of things that were some of the happiest times in my life. And that was my sister and brother-in-law and my husband and I, we rented a barge for about 3 days, and we went on the canals in England. It was a wonderful time, and I just want to be reflecting in my stitching on a time that was joyous for me. So this is what I'm going to be stitching on. I do have some dyed fabric that's, you know, it's nice and blue for the sky. And yeah, so that's what I intend to be stitching on pretty soon. I'm thinking the piece that I'm stitching on at the moment, for once I might put it as, oh, maybe I won't put it aside, I don't know. I mean, I could probably get it done in another week or so, and then I can start on this one and really just indulge myself, which is probably what I will do, because I don't like to leave things half done. I think it just creates some kind of mental block against the piece. And, you know, this idea of rotations and everything, whereas I do understand them, and I think that if you're able to do those, that's great. But for me, for the first couple of days or so, if I've put something down, it takes me a couple of days to get back into it, to get in my spot, you know, where I'm stitching, to refamiliarize myself with the colors and the threads and everything. For me, it's a lot easier to just keep plowing through, you know, and I save time that way, I think. What else have I got over here? Oh no, this is one. Now, Harlequin, he went to a psychic once, and the psychic told him that he and I had been married before, and that we had been Navajos, and he was a shaman, a medicine man. And I am open to everybody's ideas about that kind of thing, the spiritual world and everything. I mean, I think I've sorted myself out in that department, but it doesn't mean that I'm not open to what someone else may or may not feel that they know. And I mean, psychics, where there are a lot of them that are, you know, what you would call phonies or whatever. There are some of them that say things that really aren't fathomable. I went to one and she told me 3 things that nobody else would know, and I certainly didn't tell her. So, you know, I think it all sort of goes together, all fits in somehow, but, you know, that did rock me a little bit on my heels, I must say. And it did give me a great lot of peace of mind too, because she answered a few questions that I had that I just couldn't understand. And yet when she filled me in on it, it kind of, I had peace with it, because I understood perfectly why these things had happened and everything. It was amazing. Anyway, get on. Right, now then. So I got this anyway. Mystic Stitch, Across the Divide, Steve Reed. And I thought that was a pretty nice piece for Harlequin and I. Because you've got the couple there, and you've got them riding their horses together. And it's really rather nice, isn't it? So that's a piece that I'm going to be stitching. I've already started the gridding for that. But it's another big piece, so I'm, you know, I just don't know. I mean, I've got less stitching days ahead of me than I have behind me. And so, you know, but I think if you start thinking that way, you won't be doing anything, will you? So you may as well just keep going, and that's all there is to it. Anyway, I think that's just about all that I was going to say. If you're with me this long, thank you very much for your company, for your fellowship, and for spending time with me. May the good Lord bless you and keep you through these times. You know, I suppose, you know, God gets a lot of blame for things, but people should remember there are evil forces in the world. You know, I'm one of those few people, probably. I mean, I don't know how many, but I just don't think God is all powerful. I think that he has enemies, and I think they know he's going to get the blame for whatever happens. You know, they know that people say, oh, why did he let this happen or that happen? So I think, you know, that's worth thinking about as well. That, you know, he wants the best for us, and just keep that in mind, you know. Yeah. So until next time, look after yourselves and use the opportunity, if you're confined to quarters, to get your stitching done. It can calm the spirit and, you know, make you feel better. And that's me signing off. So it's goodbye from Mary Rose. Until next time.